Hello there, and welcome to the Star Wars Guys YouTube channel where the Force is family. I am Master Paul,
And I'm Mando on fire.
and we are finally back. The two original brothers that started this channel. We are back for a good old school pre-recorded video, and we're going to be reacting to this article that pretty much every Star Wars channel has, at least in our circle of community, has reacted to at this point. The Vanity Fair article that I'll bring up on screen now that's titled Star Wars, The Rebellion Will Be Televised. So before we even get into this, what's your reaction from that title? And I'll go ahead and read the subtitle too. It says, an exclusive look at the master plan for Obi-Wan Kenobi with Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, Andor with Diego Luna, and Ahsoka with Rosario Dawson in a fleet of new shows. So how do you react, Michael, to The Rebellion Will Be Televised?
Well, it seems pretty clear as to what the plan is, where it's not just focusing on one singular or a set of stories, but rather multiple stories that are within a shared universe. Pretty much, we're getting the equivalent of the MCU in Star Wars, it seems.
Yes, which that approach for sure has worked with Marvel, arguably to a certain point, but that's an entirely different discussion. But here's something else that I read out of that title. TV shows are now the primary focus of Star Wars, not so much movies. And I'm not sure that I like that because, yeah, the shows, if you discount Book of Boba Fett, the shows have been great to good, but there's just something about seeing Star Wars on the big screen. Like, we both saw the sequel trilogy in theaters as they released. And, we may have our thoughts on those movies, but it was still a special time, especially when the Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker that we saw together.
Yeah,
That was
even more
still,
so Rise of Sky, even more so Last Jedi.
yeah, that was still a special time that if they focus more on TV shows than movies, that we won't get quite as often anymore. But maybe they'll talk about that more in the article. Like I said, I personally have intentionally avoided all coverage of this article because I wanted to go into this as fresh as possible, and I'm sure you did the same too, right, Michael?
Well, admittedly, I did look at this article a little bit just to get some idea of what's going on because it's been popping up everywhere, and I can't help but think to myself, what are they talking about? Until
Right,
today, of course.
right. Well, with that, let's go ahead and get into it. So this was written on May 17th, and here we go. Diego Luna couldn't trust the driver. He didn't think he could trust anybody. And hadn't he read something about an epidemic of eavesdroppers hacking phones? That was just my paranoia, the actor says now, not connected to reality. Still, he pressed his phone so tightly to his ear it made his face hot, as a voice from thousands of miles away told him secrets from another galaxy. The car was stuck in traffic on the top tier of a double-decker highway in Mexico City. I was speaking in code words because I was trying not to say too much in the car, says Luna. The words he was avoiding most strenuously were star and wars. Luna had played the dauntless rebel spy Cassian Andor in the 2016 film Rogue One. Now, on the other end of the phone was Tony Gilroy, who had punched up the movie's script for reshoots. Gilroy, whose credits include writing the first 4 Bourne thrillers and writing and directing Michael Clayton, was developing a series that would explore Andor's backstory, revealing what drew him into the Galactic Rebellion and how he evolved from a self-serving nihilist to a selfless martyr. Luna's call with Gilroy, the first time he'd heard the full plan for the Andor story, happened more than 3 years ago. One thing I remember from being part of this since day one is how little you can share of what happens, says the actor. I have kids. It's painful for them and for me. And before we move on, we get these images here. So on the left, we have Vader, Reva or Reva, not sure yet how you say it,
We'll
and
find out.
Obi-Wan. Yep. And then on the right, we have Mon Mothma Cassian Andor, Mando. I know his name's Din Djarin, but it's still more natural to say Mando, and Ahsoka. In fact, can I bring these? Let's see if I can make these images bigger. I can't.
Yeah.
But still, these are good images, I think. Especially how Vader looks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is the best looking Vader suit I've seen in a while. And I was watching someone on TikTok, you
Yeah.
probably follow him, Michael, Canadian Vader, and he was pointing out like
Um,
all you know what I'm talking about, right? The video where he's pointing
I
out
feel
the
like I I
hmm,
feel like maybe.
yeah.
But
Well,
anyways,
this
continue.
video, yeah, this video, for those that aren't familiar, he is someone that cosplays as Vader, and he has like several different Vader cosplays designed from each individual movie. And it was cool to see him picking out what different components come from what movies for this Kenobi version of Vader. So that's just a little aside. So moving on. George Lucas himself had attempted and abandoned a live-action Star Wars series called Underworld before he sold Lucasfilm to the Walt Disney Company in 2012. Scripts were written and test footage shot, but the level of quality he was looking for proved to be too expensive for a TV budget. And just as a quick side note there, we've seen what happens when shows get too expensive for a TV budget. I mean, do you remember the show Terra Nova?
All too well. That was like one of the greatest shows that had since pretty much been forgotten now.
Yeah,
I remember it was a
but
big
if
hit, but now it's almost as if it never existed.
and if I remember correctly, the biggest reason why they canceled it, or one of the biggest reasons, was its budget for special effects, because the dinosaurs that they showed in that TV show were like on par with the
And
Jurassic Park franchise.
yeah, yes. And of course, for anyone who has not yet seen it, feel free to Google Terra Nova or try to find it somewhere. It's
Yeah,
definitely worth a watch.
highly recommend. Then in 2017, Lucasfilm was tasked with trying again, this time making not one series, but a whole fleet to bolster its parent company's streaming ambitions. Disney Plus would need the firepower of many Star Wars shows to compete against rival titans like Netflix and Amazon. The Mandalorian, we know now became a global phenomenon, which only raised expectations. This winter, the Book of Boba Fett delivered a redemption story nearly 4 decades after the title character's apparent demise in Return of the Jedi. Now, with 130 million subscribers waiting, Disney has upped its demands to 3 separate Star Wars shows within a year. For this story, Lucasfilm has lifted the secrecy surrounding its TV universe and how it formed, as universes do, under immense pressure. And then here's some shots of some photo shoots that they were doing, which is pretty cool, especially seeing Rosario Dawson here posing with the lightsabers.
Yeah, it definitely has the same sort of feel as the gallery for the Mandalorian and all that good stuff.
Yes. First up is Ewan McGregor's return to his role as a weary Jedi Master in exile. Obi-Wan Kenobi debuts May 27th, which, by the way, as of today, that is
Nine
officially
days.
1 week, yep, 9 days away at time of recording. Tracking the character 10 years into his time on the desert world of Tatooine, where he serves as a distant guardian to young Luke Skywalker and is hunted by a dark side inquisitor named Reva. Again, they'll tell us when it's time. Luna's spy saga Andor hits screens late this summer. Season 3 of The Mandalorian, reuniting Pedro Pascal's helmeted gunfighter with his little green ward Grogu, drops in late 2022 or early 2023. Next year, Rosario Dawson will lead the series Ahsoka, playing the live-action version of a fan-favorite Force wielder from animation who was once an apprentice to Anakin Skywalker. Slightly further off is the Acolytes, with a tale set about a century before the era of the Skywalkers. It
Mm,
is a bountiful time to be a Star Wars obsessive, to say the least. McGregor, who wrestled with joining the galaxy in the late 90s and wrestled again with whether to return, says the gig has saturated his life. My partner Mary is doing that Star Wars series with Rosario and she's about to start, he says. Lucasfilm hadn't previously confirmed rumors that Mary Elizabeth Winstead will be in Ahsoka, but now they don't have to. Our little boy was born into this massive Star Wars family, says McGregor, whose son with Winstead was born last summer. He will either embrace it or really go the other way. I don't know. Maybe he'll be a Trekkie. Live long and prosper. On that day in mid-2019, when Luna was recruited for Andor, the actor remembers looking out the car window at the rooftops of the adjacent buildings, visualizing the tale about resistance-minded spies and near-death escapes. He was especially glad that Gilroy's proposal included details that resonated personally. Luna describes Andor as a refugee story, with desperate people fleeing the Empire at the full force of its power. It's the journey of a migrant, he says. That feeling of having to move is behind this story, very profoundly and very strong. That shapes you as a person. It defines you in many ways in what you're willing to do. Gilroy breathes deep and reveals a little bit more about Andor. This guy gave his life for his galaxy, right? I mean, he consciously, soberly, without vanity or recognition, sacrificed himself. Who does that? That's what this first season is about. It's about him being really revolution averse and cynical and lost and kind of a mess. The story begins with the destruction of Andor's birth world, and then follows him into adulthood when he realizes he can't run forever. His adopted home will become the base of our whole first season, and we watch that place become radicalized, Gilroy says. Then we see another planet that's completely taken apart in a colonial kind of way. The Empire is expanding rapidly. They're wiping out anybody who's in their way. By Journey's End, Andor's path will be to block theirs. So any thoughts on what we've read so far?
Well, they do get one quote correct 100%, and that's the one where it's talking about where Andor sacrificed himself without any sort of recognition, because even though that, keep in mind, these movies were made several years apart, we never hear of Andor or anybody from Rogue One within the next movies following
Which they had no
episode
choice
4.
in doing, by the
Yeah,
way.
yeah, which, like I said, keep that in mind, but still, it does work within the story.
You're right. All right, so um the show also focuses on the enigmatic rebel leader, Mon Mothma, played by Genevieve O'Reilly, who portrayed her as a young senator in Revenge of the Sith, then reprised the role in Rogue One. Mothma, then played by Carolyn Blakiston, was the priestess-like high figure in 1983's Return of the Jedi, who outlines weaknesses in the new Death Star, gravely intoning, "Many Bothans died to bring us this information." In Andor, her story will run parallel to the title character, whom we know will eventually become one of her key agents. It is a huge orchestral Dickensian, I think I said that right,
Yeah.
ensemble cast, said Gilroy. Luna remembers the conversation in the car as the moment he was all in. At the end, Gilroy said to me, "You want to take this risk with me, man? It's you and I from beginning to end," says the actor. It was like you'd been recruited to join a rebel force. I was like, yes, of course, man, yes. Then reality set in. What did I just say? This will be happening in London. My life is in Mexico. Holy no word, what have I done? It's the theme that binds all of the new shows, devotion. And then here's where we get into some really important stuff from Kathleen Kennedy. What's
Mm-hmm.
unique about Star Wars is that we're one story, basically, says Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy. George was always dealing with episodes. Ironically, he was serializing his storytelling. He was influenced by Flash Gordon and cliffhangers on Saturdays at movie theaters. All of that informed what the DNA of Star Wars is, which is why I think it's just organic that we made the transition into television. The transition was not an obvious pivot for an empire built on movies. When she took over Lucasfilm in 2012, Kennedy's primary goal was to rejuvenate Star Wars with a new era of films after a trilogy of prequels that underwhelmed many fans, which I kind of call BS on. Yes, there's people that genuinely did not like the prequels, but how much of that was just the media, spinning that up, do you think, Michael?
Well, it certainly was different from the OG Star Wars, where we obviously know of complaints like Jar Jar, young Anakin, some of the dialogue that was made in Episode 2, and how pretty much Episode 3 is what carried the trilogy at the time. But of course, over time, I'm sure older fans learned to like it. And obviously, we didn't have to learn to like it. We automatically liked it because we grew up with it, which that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Few producers were better poised to do that, given her legacy of crowd pleasers ranging from E.T. to Back to the Future and The Sixth Sense. By the end of 2015, Han, Leia, and Luke were back on the big screen in J.J. Abrams' The Force Awakens, which Luke was barely in, by the way, which introduced the desert scavenger Rey, the redemption-seeking stormtrooper Finn, and the X-Wing hotshot Poe Dameron, and the brooding Sith wannabe Kylo Ren. Rian Johnson's sequel, 2017's The Last Jedi, continued the Skywalker saga as it came to be known, but veered sharply from Abrams' vision and seemed to close off some central storylines. Abrams U-turned back when he returned for 2019's final chapter, The Rise of Skywalker, taking over Episode 9 late in development. The movies all earned billions, but the zigzagging narrative was conspicuous. All of this led to the hiatus, a fallow spot in the Star Wars film landscape that Kennedy announced in early 2019, months before The Rise of Skywalker even debuted. Lucasfilm needed to regroup and rethink. We've all recognized, every single one of us, that this was a new chapter for the company and that we needed to all work together to create the architecture for where we were going. Factor in the standalone movies Rogue One and Solo, and the Bay Area production company had been churning out a blockbuster a year, a breakneck pace considering that Lucas himself only released one Star Wars film every 3 years, with well over a decade between trilogies. Kennedy wanted to dispense with the annual deadline and reconsider everything. The most important lesson they'd learned was this: Star Wars required a greater degree of professional devotion from filmmakers. Anyone who comes into the Star Wars universe needs to know that it's a 3, 4, 5 year commitment. That's what it takes. You can't step in for a year and shoot something and then walk away. It requires that kind of nurturing. Getting something appropriately cosmic prepped for their streaming service's launch became Disney's highest priority. It had to feel as big as the film, so Kennedy turned to a filmmaker. So before we go into that, let's go back a little bit to where it's talking about how they dispensed with the Star Wars movie a year formula. We've all said very negative things about Kathleen Kennedy.
Mm.
Many people have. However, I will give Kathleen Kennedy this. Assuming that it was indeed her that made the decision not to make a Star Wars movie a year anymore, I agree with her on that one.
Yeah.
Because look at video games, for example. We've seen what happens when a video game series becomes one of those, we got to release something every year type of thing.
Yeah.
Call of Duty, for example. At
Mm-hmm.
best, it just becomes the same formula over and over again. At
Yeah.
worst, it's the same formula over and over again, and the game
Yeah.
plays outright bad.
Yeah. And same token, if you do release games like that, there's nothing that you're really improving on.
Mm-hmm.
Where that's where it seems like Star Wars is taking. Where if I were to compare Star Wars to anything right now, it's like the movies are like the main installments of a video game, and it can be whatever may come to mind. And then side
Yes.
stories are the TV shows where it's going to focus more so on a certain aspect of the Star Wars universe or just whatever it seems to come to mind. Of course, we
Mm-hmm.
can go into it as we continue the article.